A primitive, original pattern or amatrix most likely exists in dimensions that are out of our comprehension. However, deviations and subsidiary structures of this pattern interacting with each other, together with their potentials of valence, create an effect that is perceptible to some, and some people are even able to reproduce it into mind. Bending works of art. Either be establish the artist as an interpreter of the pattern, as someone who has a gift of reading it, but first and foremost a gift of transmitting a voice of the matrix to a broader audience. The reason why is the artist capable of translating a particular part of the complex environment of the cosmos and not another is not always clear, and the artist himself is naturally not the only interpreter of the pattern. I would rather suppose that an artistic expressing caused by the impacts of the matrix on a human psyche is one of many possible manifestations of his sensitive soul, which is an important premise for an ability to derive from the source code. I therefore perceive the role of an artist as a continuation of shaman tradition. I believe that the diversity of artistic expressions is a testament of an infinite complexity of the source, and any new approach of reading it helps to create another of its dimensions. We can easily observe this fact in sacral architecture. There are three dimensions, an architectural, a musical, and a spiritual dimension in a cathedral, and they are linked together in a timeless intersection. Three shamans, a priest, an architect, and a composer are working together to amplify the effect of the source code on a visitor of this sacred space. Each one is making it its way and complements the others at the same time. Their cooperation is not a sum of spectrums of the matrix that they are able to translate, but it is an exponential augmentation of all of them. The result is an overwhelming and upright-heading vectorization of energy that is almost visible to the human eye because its emanating glow rises through the walls, making them nearly disappear. If we focused on a natural geometrization of structures, we would inevitably realize that understanding its functioning is a process that would be impossible to comprehend in a short human life. Unless we learn from perceptions of the whole area from previous generations, we can follow the progression of the regarded thinking through the whole human history in quite a detail and register some formations of so-called data repositories of related knowledge. We cannot claim that the concerned objects just developed from simple ones and got more and more complicated. On the contrary, I presume that the complexity of these checkpoints was and still is evolving directly proportional to the intellectual awareness of its audience. A fascination by an ornamentality, despite being so inherent to a mon, is not always necessarily connected to a reference of sacral dimension that it usually transmits. In layman's terms, a hilt with a pair of compasses is able to create a number of shapes without having them holding any meaning in a spiritual dimension. However, some seemingly randomly placed objects in a field could, after a deeper examining, reveal an above sidereal sky. If we defined an ornament as a set of points in a symmetrical arrangement, the previous sentence would not make much sense, but the opposite might be the truth. The structures, on whose essences I am focusing here, are tangible, and therefore not kinetic, reflections of storylines and patterns, which are substantially dynamic and are also very often reflections of various cycles. Thus, the few objects that could look like a carriage or a beer cup to someone are actually extremely symmetrical, as their true meaning lies beyond them, or in other words, above them. If we lie down in the exact same spot and settle on your shutter speed, as a photographer would say, then we would observe an incredibly complicated representation of coordination of mentioned objects. Being self-conscious of our own dynamic is an equally important part of our observation because, even that it might not be obvious to some, we are constantly moving through a time and space on our own little object. I suppose that this is quite a complicated thought for everyone, especially when most people need to deal with problems of a more existential nature. So it seems that the chosen individual, his predispositions being any nature, who does not engage in social aspects and diverse hard conditions science of life has to compensate for his conduct by translation of his own thoughts, and therefore a social status of an interpreter of the source code is formed, and it is present under many different names through the whole human history. This whole observation of mine is in principle quite primitive and abbreviated. The preliminary thesis is, however, just a base of my reasoning. We would get to the core of the problem of interpreting the source code, whose existence I present here as a question, if we got to the point where the factual and the symbolical dimensions intersect. There is a complex metaphysical environment of architectural, philosophical and theological patterns of the intersection. When we accept the aforementioned proportionality between a complexity of a structure and its original percept as a starting point of our observation, we will undoubtedly, sooner or later, find an exemplary case. I think that the pinnacle of an interconnection in a triangle, a stimulus, an interpretation, a recipient, is sacral architecture, and if I had to select its top element, it would have to be a Gothic cathedral or its Oriental opposite. I will not dare to compare the profoundness of their structures, but I am aware of their parallel purposes. If a person is, even subconsciously, able to apprehend the pulsating, almost psychedelic structures of Oriental patterns, the multiplied space of the Gothic cathedral will have a similar effect. And the fact that those seemingly incomparable objects have the same tendency to interweave a detailed geometrization with the symbolism-permeated environment is not without that cause. There is the same source hidden there in the concept. Our source behaves basically like a black hole, or rather a hidden cosmic object not directly visible to the human eye. What we can observe is an impact on its surroundings, being it an axis deflection of other object or an expansion field of particles accelerated by its presence. I hope that there is no reason for disproving my thoughts or implementing any religious or scientific dogmas. I am just trying, as an artist, to submit a hypothesis about the existence of this phenomenon. I find its impact fairly self-evident. Let the fact that some structures affect the human psyche and others do not be a testament. Only just the phenomenon of the same patterns and combinations emerging throughout all cultural circles makes me presume that there is a something they all originated from, a something we are not able to designate, but feel and transmit to others by connecting our transcendental perception with the geometrical structure. The structure defined by these footholds together with my own lexicology and diction of my work.